Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webcast. My name is Christine Dorsey Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio chapter of the American Planning Association, and I'm your webcast moderator. Today is Wednesday, July 29th, and we will hear the presentation, The Leading Edge in Trees, Stormwater, and Urban Design. Can't believe it's almost August. Coming up next on your screen, here we go. For technical help during today's webcast, you can type your questions in the chat box found in your webcast toolbar. And for your content questions related to the presentation, again, just type those in the questions box in your GoToWebinar tool panel, and we will answer those at the end of the presentation during the Q&A. Coming up next, excuse me, the list of our sponsoring APA chapters and divisions for 2020. Thanks to all of those participating chapters and divisions for making these webcasts possible and free to members. Today in particular, we are sponsored by the Urban Design and Preservation Division of APA. We will hear from Representative Margaret Rifkin in just a moment to talk more about division initiatives and what's coming down the pipeline. Coming up next on your screen is a screenshot of our webcast webpage, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. This here is where you can register for all of our upcoming webcasts. We're actually booked every Friday through the end of the year, and so now we are doing Wednesdays and Thursdays just to meet the demand of the current times. So be sure to check back on our webcast webpage for all the new webcasts that are coming along. Like I said, this is a screenshot, so I just wanted to go through this. The prior webcast tab, that's where you can download PDF copies of all of our previous presentations. The distance education tab, we have a few sessions available for on-demand viewing through the end of 2020, one for ethics, one for law. So be sure to check all of those out. And again, just visit our webcast webpage for all the details that you need. Let me get to my next slide here. There we go. This webcast has been approved for 1.5 AICP CM credits for live viewing. For those AICPers, just head over to planning.org, log into your MyAPA account, and from there you can either search by today's title or event number, both of which can be found on our webcast webpage, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. For our friends on the line that are not AICP but have other credentials that they need continuing education for, we will be sending out an auto-generated certificate of completion if that helps you get the self-reporting credits that you need. So watch for that in your inbox at the conclusion of today's session. Like us on Facebook. Just search Planning Webcast Series. That's where we post any up-to-date information about schedule changes or new webcasts that are available for registration. And be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just head over to YouTube and search Planning Webcast. We record all of our sessions, including this one, and we post them on our YouTube channel. So when you subscribe to us, you'll have access to over 300 videos, and you'll be among 3,000 other subscriber friends. So be sure to do that. With that, I am now going to turn it over to Margaret Rifkin, who's going to go over some of the urban design and preservation initiatives and introduce today's speaker. Margaret.
Thank you, Chris. So welcome from the Urban Design and Preservation Division. I'd like to start with a statement from the leadership of the division concerning the renewal of our commitment to equity, and that we are strongly committed to amplifying the voices of people of color in the community and in our professions, in acknowledging the perspectives and contributions of people of color, identifying and avoiding negative bias, and discerning and opposing inequitable policies, plans, and laws. And this is an articulation of what we hope that we have been doing, and a recommitment and a strengthening. We're working on an action plan with specific items in it, which we will share with our membership later in the year. So today's webinar, as you know, is the leading edge in trees, stormwater, and urban design. And I'm first going to give you an update of our division's programs. First, want you to know about a book discussion for our members. Please join our division and take advantage of the book discussion. It's scheduled for August, and we're looking at the past and future city, which is how historic preservation is reviving America's communities. We've expanded, we also have an open house that is in lieu of our national business meeting. It's again, for our members. It will be virtual, coming in late August or early September, and it will be creative and fun and worthwhile. So we've expanded this year's webinar offerings, knowing that many of you are not able to go to, or we're not having in-person professional development in these difficult times. And so you'll see some new webinars that we've added. First, we have what we've been promoting has been the Public Art Life Cycle series, which is coming in September with our favorite lawyer, Sarah Conley Odenkirk, who will talk about the whole process from the very inception of the idea all the way through maintenance and decommissioning. And that will be broken into 2 different sessions. We also have Urban Landscape Framework and Historic Preservation. Oh, that's interesting. There we go. Thank you. Let's go back to the one on Urban Landscape Framework and Historic Preservation with Donovan Ritkema, who is well known in the field. We're delighted to have him. There will be a group of international panelists presenting via a recorded video, and then there will be a live question and answer, and we are finalizing the date on that very soon. We also have added Paul Farber, who is in charge of what is called Monument Lab, and you'll see him on the next slide. He will be presenting, ooh, not on the next slide, there we go, on power and participation, public art and radical visions. Very creative, very inspiring. Join us for that. Then in October, we go back to the streets and we look at shared streets and accessibility considerations with tool design. It works all over the continent and does great work. We're also scheduling for early next year a webinar on programs to help long-standing local businesses, which are known as legacy businesses, that are important not only to our social fabric and economic well-being, but very much to neighborhood character and community identity, which is something that we urban designers are very attentive to. If you'd like to get personal notifications of these specific opportunities, join us by becoming a member of the Urban Design and Preservation Division through the APA website. So our speaker today is Al Key, Vice President of Deep Root Green Infrastructure. Mr. Key has been involved in the green industry for 25 years as an owner of Deep Root. And together with his partners, he has received several patents for inventions which address trees and stormwater management in the urban setting, some of which you will recognize in his presentation. He's been involved in projects all over the country. For example, the Martin Luther King Memorial in Washington, D.C., Temple Square in Salt Lake City, and the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, just to name a few that you might recognize. Mr. Key has a master's from Santa Clara University. And with that, I am very pleased to introduce him to you, Al Key.
Oh, well, thanks. Really appreciate it. I am gonna turn off, everybody knows what I look like. I'm a bald guy who's 50 years old. So I'm gonna turn off my, and show my screen. And that should be good. You guys all set? Can you see my screen?
Yep, perfect.
Good. First off, thank you so much for having me today. It's a privilege to present to your organization. I would like to say that the title's a bit of a misnomer in that the leading edge has always been there. It's sort of a, I'm looking at a sort of a more paleo approach, as to use a word which is not very much in the food world these days. But generally, I think we're going to talk about how much soil that it takes to grow a large tree, the history behind that. and then perhaps a new paradigm to look at how much soil trees need and what that means to planners within your organization or throughout the country, really. And then we'd like to probably go into the largest opportunity for trees, and that would be the stormwater application. And I think then we'll take questions at the end. This particular photograph is from a project that we did in Uptown Normal, Illinois. It's a hair shout project, and it's a stormwater project, tree and stormwater project. And this is a play feature for the local Discovery Center. That's stormwater from the street in that play feature. So I consider myself a mentee of Jim Urban. And for those of you who don't know Jim's website and his work, he's been involved with the trees and soils for over 40 years. And now he's mostly retired. But this is my favorite picture of Jim. Jim it does not mince words, as you can see in the quote. I love this quote from him. He says, "It's not good design if the trees die." And while that's controversial, I'm gonna, if you find anything controversial within this presentation, it's all Jim's fault because I'm greatly indebted to him for a lot of this content. So I would like to go forward. I would like to go forward and show one of Jim's slides. It was a favorite slide of mine. And it's to say requirements to grow a healthy tree. And there are 6 of these things. My joke is that it's 6 ways to kill a tree. If you get one of them wrong, the tree will decline and likely die. And if you get 2 of them wrong, the tree is going to die. And each one of these topics, from canopy growth or the nursery stock industry, the getting water in and out drainage and trunk flare, all these are webinars among themselves, you know. So I sort of feel as though that we're going to be skimming the surface of 2 of these. And here we have, we're going to talk about getting water in and out of a sufficient soil volume for healthy trees. Is basically what it is. And the original document where Jim was involved was research that was done by Nina Basic from Cornell University. This was a revolutionary 1992 paper, which basically set out that for every square foot of crown projection, you need 2 cubic feet of soil. So think out to the drip line and 2 feet deep. I'm sorry about these mathematic formulas, but that's what it is, right? For metrics, or any of you guys are involved in metric, it's 0.66 of a meter for every square meter of crown projection. So again, it's out to the drip line and 2 feet deep. Nina Basic is still at the Urban Horticultural Institute at Cornell and has a vast treasure trove of research on their website. Jim popularized this academic data to the landscape architecture profession, and did so in this article in 1992 regarding how much soil volume for a tree need. Does a tree need? And while this has metric and that sort of stuff in it, I think you can see here that it's a very old-looking graph, and I kind of like it because it's the original one that was printed in the Journal of Arboriculture, and it's sort of pre-computer. If there's, there's going to be much more graphically oriented ones, much more understandable ones. But basically, perhaps you've heard that trees need about 1,000 cubic feet of soil to to reach any kind of size, and this is the chart that they're referring to. And Jim just arbitrarily selected 1,000 cubic feet of soil right there in the middle there. Because it was an easy multipliable number, but the chart is such that they don't really have they have a crown projection in terms of meters and feet. But if you want to have a 16-inch caliper tree or DBH tree, that's diameter breast height, growing 30 feet on center with an overarching canopy, that particular tree needs 1,000 cubic feet of soil per tree. Jim subsequently then planted this into the Landscape Architectural Graphic Standards, which was assembled by Len Hopper. Len is probably the nicest guy on the face of the planet. He works here in New York City. But Jim wrote these specifications, and there you can see the Journal of Arboriculture chart, which he published, I think 10 years previously or 14 years previously to this one. In here is the reference to Cornell University with, you can see the graphic in the upper left hand of the picture. This would be, again, 2 cubic feet for every square foot of crown projection is what that graphic represents. There also, there's been research about how shared rooting volumes of soils and trees, soils and trees are beneficial as well, and so he goes into that specification as well. So what are the cities doing about this? Many cities have downtown streetgate standards. This one happens to be for Columbus, Ohio, where they mandate 1,000 cubic feet of soil for street trees and 700 cubic 50 feet of soil for shared rooting volumes. It was adopted in October 2015. This particular, also here's another one from Ohio. Christine is from the Ohio Planning Organization, so I'm showing some Ohio slides. The Cleveland Tree Plan, in Appendix B of this plan, calls for 300 cubic feet for small trees, 600 cubic feet for medium trees, 1,000 cubic feet for large trees, etc. I think this is all well and good, but I sort of get frustrated, or actually, hold on, let me got one more slide, a couple more slides here. I thought I was going to go. And in Florida, they need soil volumes to make sure that the wind throw potential of the urban forest is minimized. So even more than 1,000 cubic feet of soil per tree. Professor Ed Gilman, who's sort of the tree researcher emeritus at University of Florida and a wind throw specialist, is recommending these volumes for trees, right? Likewise, this is probably the best of the first round of the green infrastructure standards. This is the District Department of Washington, D.C. Department of Transportation Green Infrastructure Standards from 2014, which Meredith Upchurch wrote, demanding that developers provide 1,500 cubic feet of soil for large trees, 800 cubic feet of soil for medium trees, 500 cubic feet for small trees. And there's a 25% reduction for shared rooting volumes. I'll come back to this later, but there's no inference for soil quality in this. And I do get a little bit of, but this is before there was really a lot of research regarding soil quality for this green infrastructure market. I do get frustrated with all the numbers though. And God knows my math skills are so terrible. Every time everybody says, oh, 1,000 this, 1,000 that, I start doing the math in my head, and I always have to break out my calculator. So I'd like to propose a different methodology for, for a way to think about how to provide enough soil for a tree. And this goes back to some research very early now, which is by a guy by the name of Tom Perry. Tom Perry was a researcher and the mentor of my mentor, Jim Urban. And the roots to shoots ratio of roots to trees is 1-to-1, right? So what this means is that that the top of the tree, without any of the leaves, and the bottom of the tree and the roots, the weight of the woods and the weight of the bough of the tree above ground are exactly the same. This is some research which was completed in 2018. And those charts there, you see the various bars, the various treatments, all those are comparing roots to the bough of the tree, and they are equivalent, right? So for me, if you wanted to get an oak like this, right, again, you have to think about, okay, where is the soil going to be? Where is where is the access to the soil here? And so think out to the drip line. And again, 2 feet deep. So the morphology of the roots is different than the top, but the weight is exactly the same. So what does this mean for your profession? So many municipalities have urban forest canopy cover goals. And there are a lot of reasons for these goals. The social equity, environmental equity would be 2 great reasons. There'd be real estate value enhancement, urban heat island reduction, carbon sequestration, air quality. All these things are wrapped up in this recommendation of American Forests that they that they say all major municipalities should have a 40% urban forestry canopy cover. Now that the difficulty with this is that if you're going to have a 40% urban forestry canopy cover within a major city, think like you've got to have 40% of that city being a loamy soil as well, right? So that's kind of the that's the big rub, and that's the reason why I don't really have a lot of enthusiasm for million tree programs as well, because they don't have the soil in place to make sure those trees aren't replaced every few years. I would say that there are a lot of other good benefits for million tree programs, but at least for the street tree portions of these things, there's not enough room for them to grow in the long term. Recently, American Forests has completely come up with a more nuanced approach. And this is basically from the work that was done by UC Davis. The researcher's name is Greg McPherson, another good person to get a webinar in, respected researcher within the urban arboricultural market. And basically, the urban forest, through Greg McPherson, cites that, that development densities are a real problem when it comes to canopy goals. All right, so dense development patterns with more impervious surfaces have less opportunity for cover. Also, they're land use patterns, right? So residential areas have more opportunity for canopy than commercial areas, but canopy cover tends to be less in residentials of disadvantaged communities versus wealthy ones. Again, there's that equity piece that Margaret was talking about. And then there are ordinance, and we talked a little bit about that, but parking lot shade requirements would be a really good thing to have. Soil volume mandates would be another good thing to have. And of course, climate. Canopy cover in desert cities, Phoenix, Tucson, Las Vegas, is often less than tropical cities. In fact, to get large canopy covers in those cities, it would the water use would be so enormous you'd drain the Colorado River even more so than it is being drained now. So this more nuanced approach is being adopted by cities as well. And this is from Ryerson University, which is in Toronto, Ontario, and is funded by the Greenbelt Foundation, where they are looking at how riparian buffers and soil volume mandates are taking the heat island effect and segmenting it into different areas. Really kind of cool. I guess the idea is that you really should plant in the easy place first. So in the downtowns, the soil volume mandates are absolutely critical. But again, what they're doing is they're taking these chunks they're separating out these areas of cooler temperatures and more tree cover and focusing on various different areas that need it. So it's not a one size fits all thing. So I guess what I'm saying is that if you are planning to have an overarching canopy of shade, and in this case, if you want these trees along here to be have an overarching canopy from tree to tree, then you have to install at least this area of soil somehow, whether it's beneath the pavement or whether it's in an open planter. Then on top of that, you see if you want to have an overarching canopy here over the top, that's what this yellow line represents. You've got to install the soil. So there's some breakout area so these trees can access this soil over here. And then eventually, 20, 30 years from now, there'll be an overarching canopy here across the top, maybe not even that long. And you've got to start the process in the planning process, right? You've got to anticipate the soil volumes if you want the trees to get big. The difficulty is there is a singular undervaluing of soils within the design community. And of course, this is old news, right? But there are software programs out there which only give 2 feet for the tree, right? And don't even look at the soil beneath the pavement. And you know, trees are shoved into these things, amenity zones, because bus stops and bike lanes are desired amenities as well. And fiber optic conduit for Wi-Fi, absolutely another big thing that has to be taken care of. And of course, in these downtown areas, compaction is the culprit, right? So regardless of whether you measure compaction in proctor density or bulk density, you've got to get it up to a certain degree in order for it to hold up the pavement. Well, again, that's not really good for plants or for drainage, because no matter, once you get up to about 85% compaction and or about 1.6 in bulk density compaction, regardless of soil type, it's going to be root limiting, and also the infiltration rate decreases a lot. So we're going to talk a little bit about this suspended pavement category. Given in the downtowns, there's no place to put any soil, yet there are these planning or these mandates to have a 40% canopy cover, 30% canopy cover, you know, mandates to get there. How do you get that soil into the air, into our downtowns? And the answer is, there are these things called suspended pavement. This is the oldest one that I know of at the Christian Science Center in Boston, Massachusetts. These trees are planted in 1968 in an intensive green roof. This is over a parking garage. And this is a custom port-in-place system of columns and beams for tree soil. About approximately 800 cubic feet of soil per tree in shared rooting volumes. And there's an aggressive pruning strategy with these things, so that these things are very uniform throughout. So they never lindens 50 years old should be much larger than this, but generally they're pruned to keep them in place, and that's a good maintenance strategy because the soil volume here is limited. Likewise, in Philadelphia, this is a little known one. It's one of my favorites. It's by John Collins from the Delta Group. And this is over a railway, well, the SEPTA station, well, not the SEPTA station, the SEPTA tunnel is directly beneath Market Street. So the way this works is there's a grade beam down one side, there's a grade beam over here, and these are precast structural concrete over soft soil. There's a membrane separating the tree soil from the SEPTA tunnel underneath. It's really too bad with that, because they don't like the paving. They are replacing this installation with different designs, more modern stuff, and taking out these beautiful canopy trees up and down the block. Originally, I would say, well, actually 4 or 5 years ago, I walked this block for the first time, and it was a beautiful overarching canopy from 11th Street. That's where Independence Hall is, down to the SEPTA station over by on 11th Street. Over by the City Hall. And then because of SEPTA, or because there's no place to put the soil over by the station, the trees just stop. It really is a remarkable thing. This technique is alive and well today. The Chicago River Theater, designed by Sasaki and Associates in association with Jacobs and Ryan in Chicago. Again, a custom port-in-place system of columns and beams for tree soil I have every reason to expect that the trees will get really large here. One of the ones that I was involved with personally was the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, and Margaret very generously mentioned that. One of the toughest thing about this installation was not so much the tree soil or the excavation, but the fact that the installation was over the 2 potable water delivery mains for all of Manhattan. I have an apocryphal story which has David Koch going to Mayor Bloomberg about how he could get trees on top of the 2 potable water delivery mains for all Manhattan, but I think I'll spare you that particular one. So there are 6 areas of trees. These are the pollarded bosques, very beautiful. And then the alley, this is the North Alley. And that there is the South Alley. Really beautiful. It's amazing what tree soil will do. So does soil quality matter? So there are all these different types of systems out there. One is custom systems. We talked about that. That's at the Christian Science Center. There are poured-in-place systems. There are concrete forming systems. There's also on Market Street, there are reinforced concrete over the top, all that stuff. We talked a little bit about these load-bearing modules or soil cells. And then there's also structural cells. And generally the 2 to the left are of much higher quality and with more consistent plant response than the 2 to the right. And one of the things about the green infrastructure standards of 2014 is that it equates all of these things. And I think that is something that we need to move away from in terms of the way we write these codes. All soils are not created equal. Soil quality can be really complicated. There are 6 major categories when you're talking about soils, from structure, density, or organic matter, nutrients. All those things are affected by the soil biome or the soil organism biome. Soils are striated, there's pH, and there's the soil texture as well, which is a big thing. Probably the most important thing is the difference between the available water. Good soils want to make the available water as much as possible for the trees, yet only hold it for 72 hours or less is basically how it all works. But if I was a planner and I was looking, so I could you get a soil scientist to talk to college degree courses on all this sort of stuff. But if I was a planner, what I would suggest you do is think of a perfect metaphor for a high quality soil. And that would be a basket of yarn. The more soil has a structure, and when it maintains its structure as it would in the environment, there are these clods and beds within the soil which make the soil much more effective at drainage and and much more effective for providing health benefits to trees and plant response, that kind of thing. There is a researcher by the name of Susan Day. She was formerly at Virginia Tech, and she's now at UBC in Vancouver. But she did create this soil rebuilding website called soilrebuilding.org. All you have to do is remember Susan Day, Virginia Tech, soil rebuilding, and if you Google that, the specifications for soil rebuilding will come right up. So most of our recommendations come from her. The previous metaphor that we would use to describe soils is sort of like a jar filled with marbles, and don't really like that metaphor. We like to not mess with the soil as much as possible. And the high quality soil is an unscreened sandy clay loam with 3 to 5% organic matter, 10% mature compost, and a pH suited to plants. Probably around pH could be between 5.5 and 7.5, neutral being about 6.5. I would suggest unscreened, because you don't want your soil to look like this with plenty of water throughput. you want it to look more like that, with clods and beds that hold the water for different periods of time, as well as having the soil, the water flow through it. So instead of a really finely screened soil with all of the structure removed from it, you'd probably want to have some soil that looked like that, which looks as though it has less organic matter, but still retains the clods, the peds, and the natural detritus that you'd find, and the natural biome that's within these soils as well. So I'm sorry to bore you with these things. I will show a couple of slides regarding research, and this has all been done at the Bartlett Lab in North Carolina by a researcher by the name of Tom Smiley. As he's looking at various different soil qualities and that kind of stuff, and he's looking at that base loam in these suspended pavement systems outperforms these other soils at 25 to 40%. This has been confirmed by his research in 2008, where they've taken a look at various different types of soils, including loams, and lo and behold, the loamy soils in load-bearing modules is the best. The structural soils did not even outcompete the compacted controls, or they were statistically the same as the compacted controls. This means that the repercussions for cities is that structural soils, the expense you go, or structural soils will be doing exactly the same thing as doing nothing. There's little statistical difference between the compacted controls and the compacted city streets. So which cities are adopting this now as part of their soil volume mandates? So the city of Toronto was one of the first to have a soil volume mandate, and structural soils are not permitted within if you're doing a city job there. And they have 30 cubic meters per street tree mandate, and again, a 15 cubic meters per street tree in shared rooting volumes. And this is really hard for developers to get to, because if they won't get their C of O unless they provide that amount of soil per street tree. They don't really care how you get there. Also structural soils are not permitted in small cities like Pompano Beach, Florida. They're saying 1,000 cubic feet of soil in these areas, and that would be a good way to go. And here's Jim Urban's chart, computerized now. So again, a 16-inch DBH tree with an overarching canopy of 30 feet would be about 1,000 cubic feet of soil. The biggest opportunity for trees in our downtowns is stormwater. And I'm sort of changing gears here. So I think we talked about soil quality, we talked about soil volumes, but basically, again, the biggest opportunity for trees is stormwater. And if you're going to install something like this, it's a great idea to do so. But there are, since it has a very low installation costs, the trees are going to get large. The understory plantings attract pollinators. There's a known amount of stormwater which stays in these things. Really good installation that way. But the problem is that it uses a lot of land. It also collects garbage. There's a high maintenance cost associated with these, the deadheading, that kind of thing. So the idea is to sort of move this into the more urban setting. And here we have, this Southwest 12th Street in Portland by Kevin Robert Perry, a general design award of honor in 2006 from the AICP. And it uses less land, but it doesn't get away of the maintenance problem, the deadheading, that kind of stuff. There is a higher installation cost. There's also a high maintenance cost. And forget about evapotranspiration and canopy intercept. Evapotranspiration is the water that the tree takes in. And canopy intercept is the water that the tree holds in its canopy even before it hits the ground. A large London plane tree, for example, can take up to 3/4 of an inch just in the wetting of its leaves. This is because the leaves are pubescent or are slightly fuzzy, and they hold water like a magnet. So anyway, you know, I'm not saying that I think that these are both good installations, but in this particular one, the trees are never going to be part of the stormwater solution, in that they're not going to have enough soil to get really large. The largest the trees will get in this particular installation will be just about as large as those planters there. So the idea is to put the rain garden beneath the pavement. You can have multiple land uses over the time. It is more expensive to install, but it's a much less maintenance cost. And you get a choice of soils. You can design that soil to put in there. You can keep the structure. You can add clay. You can get the plant performance you need, or you can choose a sandier soil with that has a lot of throughput, and a lot of stormwater thing to it, stormwater compliance properties to it. When I was talking about doing this with Margaret, she said, don't use technical terms like a CSO. And so I decided to talk about CSOs a little bit because I'm going to present to you a case study as to how CSOs work. For those of you who don't know what a CSO is, I imagine many of you do. There are these things called combined sewers. And this means that the water from the street, this is the gray water from the street, and the black water from the buildings share the same pipe. That's all fine and dandy when it's sunny out. But what happens in rain time is that the black water is combined with the gray water from the street, and lo and behold, overruns the pipe, or the pipe is not sized big enough. So there's a check dam holding the where at the confluence of the black water and the gray water, and then this has a combined sewer, creates a combined sewer overflow, and the sewage falls directly into the receiving water body. Not the greatest design. Many cities have separated sewers. Many cities have combined sewers. The older installation, some people or some cities have a combined sewer as well as a separated sewer, depending on where they are. New York is like that itself. But any older part of the city, from Boston to San Francisco to Kansas City to you name it, these will have combined sewers. So the way that a lot of people have been dealing with this is right at the outfall to the receiving water body, they put in a great big tank that can hold the black water until it can be pumped into a treatment facility. And lo and behold, this is an example that I know of in Brooklyn. This is Pawtucket Basin. It's the combined sewer overflow facility, and it was finished in 2012. It cost $404 million to build. It cost $25 million a year in terms of operating costs. It has a 50 million gallon capacity, but only functions 80 days a year. Again, it's just a big tank to hold the black water before it gets into in this case, I think not Flushing, got a Sheepshead Bay. Yeah, so this is where the bulk of our stormwater dollars are going. And frankly, I'm involved in the tree business, so I think a more distributed approach could be a good way to go. There's nothing the matter with Pawtucket Basin. It works very well, but there are very few co-benefits that are associated with that. This graphic here was done for the Guadalcanal Conservancy for their lowlands project in Brooklyn by a firm called Scape. SCAPE is worth mentioning because the principal, Kate Orff there, recently won a MacArthur Genius Grant, the first landscape architect to do so. So I think that is newsworthy in its own right, and it happened a few years ago. But the idea is to recreate these natural systems on a distributed basis rather than putting all the water into one place. And I kind of agree with that approach. And I think the Gowanus Canal Conservancies wants to implement that approach as well. And with that, I would like to share with you a CSO basin improvement project in Spokane, Washington. So it's a historic district west of downtown. They had combined sewers for all the area. There are 21 impervious areas that were directly connected to catch basins. The projects and the objectives of the project to reduce the overflow to 1 per year per location over 20 years, and to stay within budget and provide low maintenance costs. So they considered 3 options to address their objectives, the city of Spokane. Traditional bioretentions, the storage tanks like the Partagat Basin, and then the soil cells. And these are these units where they've, they have these are, soil cells. What's the right word? Load-bearing modules, there you go. They chose the soil cell because of the small system footprint. They allowed the curb lines and parking to remain. There's no media replacement needed. And in the state of Washington, it was approved as a bioinfiltration equivalent. And it reduced the overall maintenance as well. So the way it kind of worked was they take water from the street. Here, this thing fills up where the granularity and the velocity is taken out of the water and then pushed out into the cells themselves. There were several different designs depending on the width of the streets, but basically it comes out, the water comes into a junction box and is distributed out to the cells through this junction box on the far side away from the catch basin. So the CSO 14 and 15 basin improvements in Spokane, it's an example for any community which is combined sewer system is overtaxed, failing, and old. In the urban environment where space is a premium, many municipal districts have to comply with state and federal regulatory requirements to account for the conveyance of those stormwater discharges and reduce the occurrence of untreated sanitary wastewater and runoff and rainfall and snow melt. Now, prior to 17, the city reported 144 outfall events or CSO events at 26 monitoring sites, in which 71 million gallons of untreated water was released in the Spokane River. Since the project's completion, the city has monitored these things, and there's virtually, and it's our understanding that there have been no CSOs since the instigation of this particular installation. Getting towards the end of the presentation, and I did want to show you, I always like to finish up with some really great photographs of a major hit that we had. And this was the Uptown Normal redevelopment in Uptown Normal, Illinois. Again, a tree and stormwater project dating from 2010. And basically they had an old stream bed running through town, which acts as a cistern. So the water from the street and the water from the sidewalks are handled differently. The water from the sidewalks is fed through these load-bearing modules or soil cells and then pushed out into this round roll here. I made an allusion to this before. This is my first slide that I showed you. The water is pumped out of this cistern. It goes around the round roll one way, and then is pumped out into this prairie bog, a filtration prairie bog around the perimeter as well. So this is it being installed, and that's what it looks like, I think in 2017. And again, kids from the Discovery Center are playing in water, stormwater filtered from the street. The plant response has been dramatic. You can see some of the, and again, you can see where this 2 times canopy projection, that's the amount of soil volume you need. 2 cubic feet for every square foot of ground projection. You can see that going on there. It's good. And it's got lots of awards. And so that's the reason why we like to highlight this one. Is it? And if anybody needs any information on this, there's a Landscape Architecture Foundation case study, which is excellent. I also know the partner in charge at Herr Schout, who did all the designs. I'd be happy to forward that his number over to you. These are some of his photographs with this as well. And with that, I would like to thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to you. And at this point, I will take on questions.
Wonderful, thank you. Folks, you can type your questions into the chat box in your webcast toolbar if you have them. And just as a reminder, we are recording this webcast and it will be available on our YouTube channel. Just search Planning Webcast on YouTube and we'll show up. And we'll also have a PDF available of this slide deck at ohioplanning.org/planning webcast. Okay, questions. First one. Do you have soil volumes for growing coniferous trees for those of us in Western forest regions?
I don't think the research ever got into the different kinds of trees, or at least I don't know. If you had some, I would know it. I would like it, but I would like to see it. I would say that you sort of should look at the volume of the tree itself and coniferous, coniferous trees, and then try to estimate that and put that same soil volume underneath the ground. I don't think it changes because the tree is coniferous. The research is also lagging in areas of the where trees are fastigiate or columnar. So we don't really know, like if the tree is columnar, if it takes less soil than if it's a spreading cultivar.
Okay, next question. Ooh, now they're coming in. Okay, next one. How do we put teeth in the requirements we create for developers? Too often trees are dead last in priorities.
Yeah, that's the reason why I showed you some soil volume mandates which are required by cities. So in other words, the city doesn't really care how the street tree gets its soil volume. What they care about is that the tree gets its soil volume. So that's the reason why we have these soil volume mandates in a city like Toronto, or in a city like Pompano Beach, and a city like Washington, D.C., where the developer has to do it, or they won't get their C of O. I think probably the thing that really you need to do is you need to get this into law, and you need to get this through the governing entity which would write the specifications for developers.
Okay, thank you. Can you please address the ability of a root system to access oxygen in different settings?
One of the things that people do is they confuse oxygen in things like channel drains and that sort of stuff as micropores and within soil. So when you stick a drain pipe in to a field of into a cell, into a street tree configuration, the area of influence around it is only a couple inches, if that. And then doing so also reduces the amount of volume that the tree would have. So if there is an uncompacted soil that the tree can access, it will, if it drains, there will be oxygen going through it. And I'm not a big believer in these root channels or air channels and that kind of stuff, because it's really the way the oxygen, if it drains, the oxygen will follow. It's got to, street trees need vents more than they need additional oxygen channels, if you will. I don't know if I answered your question. I think maybe they were looking for something more physiological.
Okay. Next question. Your slides on how did you pronounce that? ALLE. That's the street. It was towards the end of, well, no, it was partway through your presentation. You had a slide on it in August, a photo from August 2019. I think it's like slide 28 maybe.
Okay, look. Yeah, South LA. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay.
Should I put that up again?
You don't need to. The question
Okay.
is, I just wanted to reference it because it's in reference to this. What's your recommended shade tree species to use in this type of design in the Mid-Atlantic region?
You know, I would say that for stormwater, most of our any common street tree will work great with this particular deal. Those were in that particular slide. Those were American lindens, and which is actually, is that Tilia cordata? No, I think they're European lindens actually. Any street tree that is common within all the lists that you would have are considered low-lying species. So this means that they're very accustomed to having their feet wet and living in low oxygen environments. When you think about it, taxodium, red maple, Linda, all these things are all low-lying species. So it really doesn't matter. The best tree list that I've ever seen in terms of street trees and that kind of stuff is the city of Denver's. And I think that in there is literally hundreds of different cultivars that they would use for street trees. When you can use them, when you shouldn't use them, the difference between salt and no salt, the difference between or salt tolerance and no salt tolerance, that kind of thing. It's just a great list. Hopefully I answered the question. I think what this is going to do, if you provide an uncompacted loamy soil to this thing, to these trees, you're going to be able to expand the palette of trees even further. So rather than, be limited to some street trees, Kentucky crawfish trees, service berries, whatever it is, you're going to be able to expand that palette out into new and more upland species, for example.
Well, you ended up answering a ton of questions regarding to where's a comprehensive list of great street trees. So now we know that one. Great.
Yeah, what I might do is I'll send that over to you. It really is a terrific list.
Good.
One of the things I really like about it, in northern climes, we have a problem with salt. And there's a difference between airborne salt and waterborne salt when you come to trees. And that's the only list, street tree list that I've seen that has the difference in the various tolerances between those two different types of salt conveyance.
Great, thank you. Well, since we're on that topic, in your opinion, which one is safer for a tree?
What do you mean?
Well, so, okay, for example, particularly in northern communities where we have a lot of snow and we have a lot of salt on the streets, there are, just salt trucks, and then there are the water-based, I don't even know if there's salt in them, just, yeah.
Yeah.
So which one is better for the trees?
Well, there are a bunch, I'm not really sure how to answer your question. I think the brine is a pre-treatment. So what you do is you put down the brine before the big event, and this is then it dries on the surface of the thing. And when the snow falls, the ice falls, or whatever, you don't have to plow as much, that kind of thing. And then afterwards, after you have 3-4 inches of snow, whatever it is, then you put the rock salt down. I think another way to look at this thing would be the various different kinds of salts that you'd like to have. No, you wouldn't like to have, but the various different kinds of salts that you could use instead of sodium chloride. The theory is that if you use calcium chloride or magnesium chloride, the trees need some of that as well. Frankly, it's all salt and it all kills trees. And the amount of salt that you would amount of magnesium and calcium in these salts is so great that it far outstrips the needs of the trees. So I think that the main thing about salts is you can't be stupid about it, right? You've got to use it sparingly. You have to in the spring maybe manage if there's a late event, a late snow event. What I would do is after that event you would flush these stormwater treatments or tree pits with water. Maybe there was an irrigation system, I would push that on. I would also educate those people at hotels and high traffic areas, things like that, to do this as well. Hospitals are renowned for putting together, because they're very concerned about trip and fall hazards around their sites. These people need to be educated in terms of what's healthy for the tree. So yeah, so education, spring flushing, the use of various different kinds of salts at different parts of the year, additives that increase or increase the effectiveness of salts are all good.
And while we're on that, we have a couple questions off of that. Do you have any resources that explains the pros and cons of these different salt options, that you're talking about now, and how they affect trees or even pavement? Do you have resources that folks can go to follow up and do some extra homework?
Yes, Google's a great resource, but we have a couple of papers on this. Yes, we do. And I would also say that the ISA is an excellent place. American Forest is an excellent place. They all have salt strategies for cities published on their websites. And we can run it as well.
Okay, let's see, next question. So since we've learned soil quality is important, where do you go for good soil specifications and quality soil providers?
Well, that is a kind of a loaded question, right? So, how much mining do you want to do in terms of getting the soil to the site? If you go, again, to Susan Day's work, soilrebuilding.org, we're big believers in reusing the site soil, right? So how do you take that soil that is not that bad, and how do you recondition that into something that is going to be usable either for stormwater or for trees or for both? That is a great resource. In terms of where to get soils, all soil is local, right? So there has to be a supplier who knows what they're doing, in your area. And there is sand, and this seems to be sand is a very popular way to grow things because it has great throughput of water. It can grow trees really well, etc. But it is a limited resource. So we would say first and foremost, use the site soil and recondition that to where you would want it to go, and we do have specs for that. Yeah, and then I would avoid, if you saw a mound of soil someplace and there are weeds in it and there's detritus coming out of it, that's a great soil to use because it's already growing stuff. You know that it's working. However, I would say that the Urban Tree Institute, I think is that it? The Urban Tree Institute has great soil specifications, and if you just Google that, they had a gold panel of professionals who came up with the specifications. I would say that the Urban Tree Institute would be a great place to go to get soil specifications. And it's completely open sourced. Anybody can get them. They have different versions for different areas like Florida and Texas and things like that. And they tell you how to rewrite the specs for those areas as well. So yeah, I'll provide that particular one to you as well.
Okay. Sticking with soil, is there anything you recommend with respect to older existing street trees that repeatedly break through sidewalks, perhaps due to insufficient soil volume?
Yeah, I don't think that the insufficient soil volume, I think the tree would be dead as opposed to ripping up the sidewalk, unless it found some other, means to sustain itself, either an old sewer or a building foundation, upwelling water, things like that. Also, this depends on the compaction level around the tree, right? So some of these very light utility paths that are asphalt and things like that are not compacted up to 95%, and the tree can lift that stuff very well. You can always, there's a bunch of different root barriers. There's a way you build sidewalks with gravel that works out very well. But basically, there are, I would say, 3 different kinds of roots, right? There are the root fans at the very end of the root tips, right? Those things, don't really lift up sidewalks. Then from the root fans, there are vascular roots that comes back to the bough of the tree. And those things can lift up sidewalks, but only do so in a very small, narrow way. What you're, I think, asking about is this area around the base of the tree, which is called the zone of rapid taper. And this is where, the wood from the tree comes down into the soil and spreads out. You can sort of see it. It's usually 3 or 4 or 5 inches above the surface of the soil, and that's typically what people talk about when they talk about root heaving. The dimensions of the zone of rapid taper are known, right? So if you have say a 24-inch DBH tree, the radius of that zone of rapid taper is going to be 20 feet across. So it's 1 to 10. All right. So if you have a 1-foot caniper tree, the zone of rapid taper is going to be 10 feet. So again, this is a design thing, right? It's like would I really want to put a really big tree in a very small hole, or would I rather use an ornamental? And how would I do that? I would say that soil volume, when you're using these load-bearing structures or these suspended pavement systems, those things tend to push the roots deeper and so it pushes the problem of heaving sidewalks further out down the line.
Okay. Can you comment on soil shrinkage and potential tree settling and the effects that it might have?
The short answer to the question is that I'm not this person must be in Texas or California where they have expensive soils. And I'm not the expert when it comes to that. I'm sorry. But I think the idea would be to keep it dry as much as you could. But I don't know. No, I'm not gonna say anything.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Next question. Okay. Are there any mitigation strategies for sidewalk buckling and cracking in dense historic neighborhoods where we can also protect the existing trees?
Yeah, so I always make the joke that root pruning is a bit like marriage, in that you shouldn't enter into it lightly or unadvisedly, right? There are a bunch of different tools and a bunch of different things, but basically it comes down to that root pruning is not a science, right? It's an art. There are good rules of thumb. There are excellent arborists, and it comes down to who carries the insurance in order when you slice the roots off and it falls over on a family. You're creating who has the insurance in place to make sure that doesn't happen? Who knows that by severing the roots or shaving the roots or whatever you do to the tree, you're not creating a hazard condition? And that would be a certified arborist. And the American Society of Arboriculture, the ISA, ASCE's American Certified Arborist. ASCA is they're the cream of the crop, and they're the people who can advise you about how best to do that without creating a hazard condition, and they carry the insurance to make sure that it doesn't as well. Other than that, there's the standard toolbox of shaving the roots, cutting the roots, repouring the concrete, raising the sidewalk over the, there's a whole bunch of different things that you could do.
All right, thank you. Next question. Do you have any recommendations for situations where trees should be installed in tree planters due to existing utilities, for example?
These are above ground planters.
Yes.
That are sitting on concrete.
Yes, that's what I'm envisioning.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I would say only a small tree. The largest thing you should put in there would be a redbud, small ornamentals. This is intensive horticulture, bonsai horticulture kind of thing. You can't put a large tree in generally in these planters. Boxwoods, things like that.
For the Museum of Modern Art, what practices did you use to ensure you didn't impact the water lines?
That's a really good question. First off, that wasn't the Museum of Modern Art. It was the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. The deal that was made between DEP and the landscape architect was that they would keep 12 inches away from the top of the water mains, and they'd install a membrane between between the aggregate and where the load-bearing module started, and that was the deal that they came up with. In fact, you can see it in one of the pictures that is in that we had up previously.
Thank you. I was going to ask this question if someone else didn't, but someone else did. Let's talk about street grates. Yes? No? Why? Why not?
I'm not a big fan of tree grates because I'm a tree guy. Anything you can do to peel back the pavement and to make a more natural setting would be better in my mind. I've seen dozens and dozens of designs where they want it to be very architectural and very clean and that kind of stuff. And mulch is not necessarily the cleanest thing to do. It can spread out over a sidewalk. You have to replace it every once in a while. But if you want to get a great plant response, that would be the thing to do. We're talking about the space between where the sidewalk ends and where the tree is. And I think probably the best thing that you can think about and when you go into that, to talk about that space, this is a transitional area, which is going to go from a small tree and soil to all wood over time, right? So whatever you put in there, whether it's a mix of pavers or, whatever, make sure that it's easily manipulable as the tree grows. And I don't think that tree grates are necessarily the easiest way to, get the pavement or the structure or whatever that thing you would call out, you know what I mean, and let the tree get larger. So I'm not a fan. Sometimes I know this is historical preservation. Sometimes they are deemed historic. So, there's some really beautiful old tree grates, and we've done projects where they pull out the tree grates and they save them and they put them back in, specifically for that, even though there's not a horticultural reason for it.
So you mentioned mulch as a potential option. What about gravel?
I like gravel. Gravel's good. I prefer mulch. It's a natural material. Depending on the gravel too, you can use angled stones so people don't, wouldn't step on it as much. Likewise, it reduces habitat creation within these tree pits as well. Lava rock is very good at doing that. So rock is okay. I prefer mulch. sure, absolutely. Any kind of treatment like that, a Belgian block or other pavers and things like that. I know in Miami they use what is it, Chameleon Ways. It's the it's the resin bonded aggregate they use a lot. That also works as well. But then, you know, hey, I'm a naturalist when it comes to this particular question. So.
And this is purely for me. I know down in the Carolinas, there's a lot of like pine needles that are used even as mulch.
Sure.
How do you feel about that? Is that
That's fine.
the same difference? Okay.
That's fine, yeah.
Let's talk about this question. Diversity in your streetscapes. So not just one species. What are there certain species that you should be mixing together or not mixing together along your street, you know, your streetscape, or in your opinion, should they all be the same type of tree?
No, I think it's much better to have a diverse set of trees, you know, within streetscapes. Sometimes in historic preservation, at a place like the Met, where you've got, you know, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where you've got the Holabird and Roche main facade and the McKim Mead and White architecture off to that, you need a more formal look, and these long LAs of genetically identical trees. But in general, I think for street trees, there should be a varied and wide-ranging set of cultivars and species. And then there was another thing, I forgot what I was going to say. I was going to say something else, but oh well.
They do that all the time. Next question. How much separation do you recommend between the end of the tree root and water sewer lines? What is the magic separation number?
Well, you know, I think that, you know, there's an old adage is that a person won't steal if you give them a job. And, you know, I think that if you give the tree the soil that it deserves, it's not going to have to go out and find a sewer. So to sustain itself. So I would think in terms of the soil volume for the tree rather than protecting the sewers as well. So what is the magic number? I'm not too sure there is one. I will say that 60%, I think this is right, 60% of the tree's roots lay outside the drip line of the tree. So, and by number, right? So we're talking about the root fans tend to be outside the drip line of the tree. So please, you know, keep that in mind if you're worried about intrusion. Again, it comes down to the mature size of the tree, not the, you know, the nursery stock size of the tree.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned that rain gardens beneath pavements are useful. Can you explain some of the requirements, how that works? Dig a little deeper into that.
Sure. Yeah, so the idea is to place a rain garden beneath pavement with this bioretentive soil beneath it. So soil is kind of always, when we work on projects, the most marked up portion of the specifications are the soil specification. Everybody's got a different opinion. And if you're using trees for stormwater, there are certain kinds of soils which provide really good throughput and really good pollutant removal properties. However, oftentimes those things are mainly sand, have lower organic matter content, and there's a big kerfuffle between the tree people and the stormwater people as to, you know, like, you know, what that soil should look like. And you know, like, will this, you know, can we increase the clay content and keep the structure in the soil, or do we have to have it all sand so the water flows through it? And the reason why you want to increase the clay content is that it, you know, it's better plant response. But the problem with clay is that it does silt through, can silt through the mix and gum up the stormwater outfalls. Right, so it's always a discussion. I'm not too sure I'm answering the question. Can you repeat your question again? There was. Uh-oh. I think so. I think someone's muted.
I'm sorry, I am. I'm sorry. I was already queuing up the next questions.
Yeah,
I'll go
sure.
back. I can find it to make sure that you
Oh, that's
answered
okay.
it.
I think I answered it. I don't think I answered it completely.
Okay. How do you build argument against engineers' requirements for soil compaction to build sidewalks, driveways, etc.?
Well, I think that we can, you know, depending on the technology that you'd like to use, you can have, everybody can have that. Everyone can have what they want. You can have uncompacted soils and compacted soils adjacent to one another, and within the same space to meet the engineering needs of the town engineer for compaction levels. 95% compactor is easily doable with any number of technologies.
Okay. Next question. A recent problem we've had with a public official on a public project is that they'd prefer to just cut down a tree and replace it every 15 years than spend money on proper everything. Do you have any recommendations on how to handle these conversations with government officials to get their buy-in?
I gotta tell you, probably everybody loves trees. I'm a tree hugger. You know, there's carbon sequestration, carbon heat island reduction. There are all these great ways of, you know, sorry. No matter what the issue is, trees have an effect, right? So whether it's ADD in kids, or whether it's health or water quality, or you know, whatever it is, trees have an effect. The one that is most commonly ignored is real estate value enhancement. And this is one of the things that the case study that I talked about at Uptown Normal is that there is a documented increase in retail sales, football revenue after it's a college town, and real estate value enhancement. And for those of you who kind of really want to get a dweeby on this, there's a really good paper by the NRDC by a guy by the name of Larry Levine. It's called The Green Edge. So just Google The Green Edge, Larry Levine, NRDC, and the study will come up. There is 400 pages worth of data. Then there's, I think, a 12-page, summary at the front of it. And I've read some of the 400-page report, but the 12-page summary at the front of it with the great graphics is something that even a city official could understand. So those kind of metrics, they're based on real estate value enhancement. Shop owners get, they get more foot traffic in these high areas with trees. They get Airbnb hoteliers get higher occupancy rates when there is a leafy and shaded area. A house with a large functioning tree in front of it is worth $7,000 more than the same house without that tree. And on a tree-lined street, and when you compare a house, similar house to one that's not on a tree-lined street, is worth $20,000 less. And that's from the University of Michigan. That's not just an advocate talking. This is real numbers. So I would go down that route with that particular official.
Thank you. Any thoughts on biochar in soil? I think that's, I assume it's like some kind of charcoal additive. That's
correct.
Okay.
We have there's been a number of different researchers looking at biochar, and we like it for any number of reasons. The history of biochar is that in Brazil and the Amazon rainforest, the native peoples would burn forests to grow things, and they did so repeatedly for thousands of years after to grow things, and then the forest would take over an even much more lush area, and the soils there are among the richest in the world because of this repeated nature of burning over time. My only, so when you add biochar in, or these biochar slurries, they actually do very well for the soil. My main problem with them is the energy use it takes to get there. So you actually have to burn these things under pressure, then you have to transport them to the site. I think you can do a lot of the same stuff with local materials, and I think that's a desirable thing for LEED and, you know, sites and things like that.
Okay, I think we have time for one more quick question. Are you aware of any self-watering planters?
Self-watering planters. Well, I don't know what you mean by a self-watering planter. I think that their irrigation systems are pretty well known. Yeah, this would be where you have some sort of catchment and then pipe the water into the tree area. So you can design. There are any number of ones that are available commercially. There are any number of irrigation systems you can buy. I'm not too sure I understand the question.
I figured you would know. I don't know either. Okay. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up here. We are recording this session, and it will be available on our YouTube channel. Just search Planning Webcast on YouTube and it'll pop up. Again, a PDF of the slide deck will be available on our webcast webpage, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. And this has been approved for AICP CM credits. I'm getting a lot of questions about AIA, ASLA credits. You can self-report if you're able to. You will be receiving a certificate via email in about an hour. So you can use that if you can. And I think that wraps us up. Thank you, Al, for joining us today. You are our tree guy now. You're the tree guy. And thank you, Margaret, hanging around in the background, and the Urban Design and Preservation Division. Everyone, thank you for joining us today, and have a great rest of your week. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.